did Friday morning. I hope you got up and brushed your teeth, cleaned up, shaved, showered, and fresh as a flower in less than an hour. Ready to go. And we get into this routine, don't we? We get into this routine. We do basically, we know a week ahead what we're going to do, don't we? Now let's be truthful. And then when we get into all these things that we've pre-planned, we say, God, what do you want me to do? But you need to ask him first. That's right. You need to get up and say, God, before I'm going to go out and make these mistakes, it's just like your automobile. It's too late to pour oil in an engine when it starts knocking. Is that right, Peanut? But how many cars have you had come in that the motor was knocking and they had poured new oil in them? See? Too late though. You can pour 40 quarts in there if you could get it in there, and it's going to keep on knocking. You need preventive maintenance. See, if you checked that oil when you got up and you changed that oil when it was time and you did preventive maintenance, that motor very probably would never start knocking. And that's the way it is in the preventive maintenance with God. That's the way it is with the service of God. Don't wait till after you mess everything up and then say, God, what am I supposed to do? You're supposed to say that when? Before you do it. It's like my mother-in-law. You take my mother-in-law. Take her if you will. She used to call me and she'd say, I need your advice on something. And she would talk to me for an hour, if I could stay that long. And then she'd say, well, that's exactly what I'm going to do. Now, she knew before she called me what she's going to do, didn't she? But she wanted to be able to tell other people if it didn't work, well, I talked this over with Joel. See? And give me the blame. Now, how many of us are that way with God? God, why'd you let this happen? Why'd you let me get my heart broken? Why'd you let my children go astray? God, why can't I pay my bills? God, why? Why'd you let this happen? And we're the ones that didn't ask God's advice. We didn't ask God for his wisdom. We did what we wanted to do the way we wanted to do it. And that caused every failure you had in 2010. Now in 2011, you need to say, God, I need wisdom. Listen to this. If any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask God. He should ask God. Don't ask your neighbor. Don't ask your boss. Don't even ask the preacher. Ask God. He's the Father of all wisdom. And he will give it generously. Generously. To all, listen, without finding fault. You know, a lot of times I think people are reluctant to ask God because they are afraid that what they're going to ask Him is not in accord with His will, or, you know, or He's going to say, dummy, why would you ask me that? But it says here that God will not find fault. God's not going to say, you stupid thing, why would you ask me? God's not going to say, that's the silliest thing I've ever been asked. He's not going to find fault with you for coming to Him and asking Him something that may be ridiculous. He loves you, and He's honored that you come to Him and ask Him. And He carefully, lovingly will give you the answer that you need. I love that part of the verse. He should ask God, who gives generously to all. He's generous with it. He gives it to everybody. Who will come to Him, and He won't find fault with it. He'll supply our needs. But, now here's the bottom line. But, when He asks, he must believe. Now, we've had a saying here the last year, believe and receive, and doubt and do without, and I believe that with all my heart. When you believe, you receive. When you doubt, you do without. There's no use going to God and asking God for something if you don't believe He's God. There's no use you asking Him for wisdom if you don't believe He's all wise. There's no use asking God for power if you don't believe in His power. You see, He knows. He knows whether you believe or not. He knows whether you're being sincere or not. And so many of us use God as our last resort after we've messed everything up. You know what I'm talking about. Doctor called a man in one day and said, I've done everything I can do for your wife. You might try calling in some Christians and praying for her. The man said to the doctor, Doctor, has it come to that? How many of us use prayer as a last resort? How many of us doubt and have to do without? Now, James says, if you don't believe, you will not receive. Now, what does he say? Let's go a little further. Because, why, James? Because, why, James? Because he who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. Now listen, underline verse 7. And that man should not think. That man. I want you to get this verse. If you don't get any other verse we've had this morning, you need to underline this in your Bible. That man should not think that he will receive anything from the Lord.
Right.
Did you get that? What did I just say? What do you get from the Lord when you ask and your mind is filled with doubt? So don't come to me and say, I don't understand. I've prayed and ain't nothing happened. You don't have to ask me why. The man shall not think that he will receive anything from the Lord. He is a double-minded person. Now, back in the mountains where I come from, we call that two-faced. You know anybody that's two-faced? Shake your hand and pat you on the back. Plotting some way to attack you. Huh? You know. Yeah, I'll stick by you. You can count on me. Yeah. And the Lord knows that. The Lord's not dumb, folks. God knows your thoughts before you think them. He knows the intent of your heart. He knows how much you love Him. He knows how much you believe in Him. He knows the number of hair on your head. Think about that. And you're not going to snow God. Now you may con your wife and you may con your boss and you may con your way through life. But God knows. And you see, when you go to God and you ask for these blessings for the year 2011, and you're holding on to the devil with one hand, you say, God, I want you to give me all these blessings, and you can't reach up to Him very, very high because you're holding on to the devil with one hand. You're holding on to the things you don't want to give up to serve God with one hand. You know what I'm saying? Those secret sins, those things that you love in the world that you've not been willing to give up. You reach up to God with one hand and you're reaching down here in the garbage can with the other hand, and you don't understand why part of your life stinks. And if you're going to do anything with God this year, if this year is going to be different than last year, you're going to have to quit doubting Him. Get rid of the sins that entangled you. And move on.